I was hearing some certain people saying they can't sleep, they can't eat, they can't even go to the toilet when they haven't taken marijuana. So, as a physician, what does that mean?
Well, either the marijuana is interfering with their sleep, which is very consistent with the literature. I mean, if you're going to use marijuana for sleep, for example, initially it may help, but over time it really disrupts the circadian rhythm and the sleep cycle, and patients tend to have more difficulty sleeping if they're going to be chronic users. And then you get into when you're getting into the potent or more potent products, there's a phenomenon called cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, where they just continue to vomit uncontrollably, and people have died from hyperemesis because their electrolytes are thrown off balance, and then they have a heart problem related to the abnormal electrolytes, and then they pass away. Like, for example, marijuana is now the most prevalent substance found when a teenager or adolescent commits suicide. It's the most common thing found in their toxicology. There's evidence showing that the father that may be using can alter the autism gene, so you may have an autistic child, not as a result of the father's use. So, and nobody's screening parents. If you have a child with autism, they're not screening.
How can they try to stop it when their body is driving more to take it more? Since they are feeling so many pains in their body, is there any practical step they could try to implement in order to stop it finally?
If this is your first time watching the show, you don't need to do anything, just relax and enjoy. But if you're back again on this show, it means you have this passion solving problems. So hit the subscribe button and let's solve bigger problems together. Thank you.
Dr. Ken, where I grew up, you know, people have always been abusing the use of cannabis in a very wrong way. And I've seen a lot of life to ruined already. Like, there's this time I was going to school, I was saying a 12 years old boy and 13 years old boys and even girls, you know, taking cannabis in a very wrongful way. They are so young and they don't even know what it is. And why is that? It's because the place they surround themselves, the system, everybody are doing it and they feel like, yeah, we just need to do it. And because it's not normal, because everybody's doing it. So I would just love you to tell us a bit about yourself. And yeah, we could start from there, Dr. Ken.
Sure, there's a lot to go into. I'm a pain medicine physician, and I practiced in Colorado for over 30 years, and I recently moved to Arizona to continue practicing pain medicine. And as a pain physician practicing in Colorado, we voted to have medical marijuana back in 2000, so 25
Okay.
years ago.
That's
And then we
that's not
implemented,
long.
yeah, it's been a long time. And we implemented the medical marijuana program in 2001. And the system was somewhat dormant for several years because there really was no infrastructure. Doctors were kind of afraid to recommend marijuana for their patients. There were no dispensaries around for people to go. But in 2009, after a lot of politics, the dispensaries opened across the state, where even today there's more marijuana dispensaries than McDonald's and Starbucks combined in the state of Colorado and in other states. As a pain physician, I started to see more patients coming to me that were taking a lot of narcotics or opioids, which is a whole other
Okay.
problem and discussion, and they were still having a lot of pain, and they were using marijuana for their pain. So it didn't make any sense to me why they were using both substances and still having a lot of pain. So I started educating myself on cannabis and reading, and the next thing I know, I was on our governor's task force for Amendment 64 when we legalized marijuana for recreational purposes. And I served on the Consumer Safety and Social Issues Work Group. I spent 4 years on our state's Medical Marijuana Scientific Advisory Council. I ended up editing a medical textbook that had 70
Wow.
authors from 4 countries and 20 chapters talking about the basic science of the endocannabinoid system, the impacts on the heart, the lung, the brain, adolescents, pediatrics, etc. I founded a nonprofit called the International Academy on the Science and Impacts of Cannabis. I don't know if you're familiar
Okay.
with our work. And then I spoke to the United Nations in 2023 as an invited speaker. And we actually, our nonprofit Isaac is a member of the Vienna NGO Committee on Drugs. So we work
Okay.
with the UN International Drug Policy. So uh, over time, I've become an expert in this space, and it wasn't really my choice to really do this. It was something that just kind of fell in my lap, and I continue to advocate for education of the public health side of things. I don't chastise people if they choose to use. It's not my business,
Mhm.
but my
Yeah.
business really is to tell people, if you do choose to use, these are the things that can happen. These are the risks. It's just like all the other substances that we have that we've done a terrible job with. I mean, we haven't done a good job with tobacco or alcohol or
Mhm.
opioid,
Mhm.
and now we simply have another substance and an addiction for profit industry that is creating public health and safety concerns. So I'm talking about driving fatalities. You're talking about adolescent and pediatric use, pediatric poisonings, geriatric poisonings, the effects on the heart and the cardiovascular system, the effects on the brain with
Mhm.
depression and suicidality, the psychosis. Like, for example, marijuana is now the most prevalent substance found when a teenager or adolescent commits suicide. It's the most common thing found in their toxicology.
Why is that, doctor?
That's a really good question. I don't think they're not overdosing on cannabis, and it's probably a two-way relationship. I mean, are they depressed because they're using, or are they using because they're depressed? But in the state of Colorado, if a adolescent between the ages of 10 and 18 complete suicide, about 40% of the time marijuana is found in their toxicology, and it's not like a very close first. The second
Okay.
substance is typically alcohol, which is about 25% or 27%. So if 40% have cannabis in their system and only 27% have alcohol, it's clearly the most common substance. And a lot of states in the United States don't even test for these things, and even for violent crimes or for adolescent suicides. So we
That's
don't
amazing.
know what the real problem is.
That's really 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 so touching. So you've spent over 25 years studying cannabis, the usefulness, what and what can it do to people's brain and every other things. So since all this while you've been in this studying, what have you seen cannabis do to people mental health, both good and bad, doctor?
Well, the mental health issue is very concerning. I mean, the brain is the primary target organ. I mean, if you want to get down to the basic science, because people always try to compare alcohol to cannabis, but they're very, very different. Alcohol is water soluble. It's in your system. It's metabolized. It's out of your system. It's very easy to track and extrapolate. How drunk you may have been, or your
Okay.
alcohol content over time, where cannabis is not water soluble, it's fat soluble. So its metabolism is very different in the blood, and it kind of tends to settle in fatty tissues, and the brain is the most fatty tissue in the body. And so the things that we're seeing over time, particularly with the increase in potency, I don't know what it's like in your area, but we have products that are being sold as medicine. Well, let me rewind. Back in the 70s and 80s, the THC content was maybe 2 to 4%.
Okay.
Those are the stuff that people were growing in their backyard, or in the forest or what have you. Now the averaged smoked flower is about 20%. There are smoked flower that is 35% THC. So you're talking about, a 300-fold increase in potency.
It's
And
bad.
that's just for the flower and the bud, but they have concentrates now that are pushing, 50, 60% THC. And then some of the other very high potent products are pushing 85, 90, some claiming 100% THC. It doesn't even look like plant material. It's like this very gooey substance that you have to um, combust with a blowtorch. I don't know if you've heard of a dab rig or any of those sorts of things. I don't know if they're available in your area, but we have
There, there,
extremely strong.
there's a lot of like I've seen a lot of stuff here. Yeah, I'm in Nigeria, you understand. There is this type of
Right.
cannabis. It's not really cannabis, it's not weed, it's not marijuana. It's more like they mix marijuana with some certain chemical, but there's this name they normally call it. They call it Colorado. You know, when people just puff it, like just one or two puff, they lost their thoughts, like 10 to 15 minutes. They just do like this, they sleep on, like it has been going so rampant on the internet. You see a lot of video, people posting it, slapping the people for them to get their senses back. So I've seen a lot of something like that. Yeah, I've seen a lot of something like that.
And that's happening a lot across our country is and that's kind of the frightening part is that back in this, back in the 70s and 80s, people they'd smoke a joint, they'd take a hit and they'd pass it to their friend and they'd go around the circle and maybe with one joint you may get one or two hits off of a joint. But now with these potent products, like the dab and the shatter and the wax, for example, if you take one hit off of that, which is extremely potent, depending on what resource you read, that can be the equivalent of about 50 joints in one hit, which is, I mean, it's insane. And you can go on the internet on YouTube and look at how to do a dab and see what these people do. They start vomiting, they pass out. This stuff is really strong and dangerous, and it's being sold as medicine, which is one of the reasons why I do what I do. I mean, I've spoken to Mayo Clinic, UCLA, MD Anderson Cancer Center. I'm speaking later this month to Johns Hopkins. Because to be honest with you, I've been very disappointed in my medical colleagues because they don't really understand what this substance is doing to their patients. And that's the reason I do what I do is mainly to educate and say, these are the risks associated with this substance. And I'm not a prohibitionist. I'm just a scientist. I'm a physician. And I just have to educate my patients and my community about what is happening. And I can tell you, people from Mayo Clinic and UCLA, if the doctors don't know, how does the general population know? Because they keep bringing me back every year. They want to hear more. They want to know more because they just don't know. They don't read. I read between 1 and 3 papers a day. I mean, the landscape continues to change.
That's amazing. And recently, there was this time I went to a certain location, you know, to give back to the streets. You understand? So I was hearing some certain people saying they can't sleep, they can't eat, they can't even go to the toilet when they haven't taken marijuana. So as a physician, what is that telling you? What does that mean?
Well, either A, the marijuana is interfering with their sleep, which is very consistent with the literature. I mean, if you're going to use marijuana for sleep, for example, initially, it may help, but over time, it really disrupts the circadian rhythm and the sleep cycle, and patients tend to have more difficulty sleeping if they're going to be chronic users. And then you get into when you're getting into the potent or more potent products, there's a phenomenon called the cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome where they just continue to vomit uncontrollably, and people have died from hyperemesis because their electrolytes are thrown off balance, and then they have a heart problem related to the abnormal electrolytes, and then they can pass away. And so there's actually a Facebook page called Recovery from Cannabinoid Hyperemesis Syndrome. They have over
Okay.
75,000 followers. If you haven't seen that page, I would recommend you go to that page and read the stories of some of these people. I mean, when they stop using, the symptoms don't just go away. They can persist for months. And these people have trouble eating, they have trouble sleeping, they have a lot of stomach pain. And so it really can ruin their GI tract. And that's the problem. And my friends in the emergency department are seeing these patients coming in every single day. And the only treatment is to stop using. and the patients won't do it. It's kind of a cycle. They say, well, my stomach hurts, I'm nauseous, therefore we're going to use the marijuana, and it might settle it down for a minute, but then they continue to remain nauseous, so they take more. And the only way to break that cycle is really to stop using.
Like since you said that there are going to be a lot of symptoms, just like the stomach pain, they won't be able to eat, sleep better. How can they try to stop it when their body is driving more to take it more? How can they stop it since they are feeling so many pains in their body? How can they? Is there any practical step they could, try to implement in order to stop it finally?
It's very difficult because some people won't stop. And the vast majority of people that use don't have a problem. I just want to be very clear with that. But there's a growing number and percentage of people that are having problems with either cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. They're having problems with depression.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that we talked about the suicidality part. We had a very nice speaker a couple of months ago from Canada who was a cardiologist who gave a very nice presentation on the cardiovascular risks, the risks to the heart and the brain
Okay.
from a cardiology perspective. And his data was somewhat concerning. And again, most of these the physicians around the world don't know this, and so they've kind of fallen into the trap that, well, it's natural, it's medicinal, but it's not this. It's not what people refer to as God's plant. That God's plant that's been around for thousands of years had a very low THC content. I don't have a problem with that plant. It's not strong. People can have problems with the lower potency stuff, but again, the average smoked flower in Colorado is 20% THC. That's 5 times stronger than it was back in the 70s and 60s. So, and then you get into the concentrates that are even much stronger than that, almost 5 times stronger than that. So you're talking about a thousand-fold increase in potency, and so we're kind of in uncharted waters. We really don't know what the long-term effects are on the brain or the body over 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, etc. And women that are using they're doing some studies showing what happens to the offspring, and those offspring are having behavior problems, they're having drug seeking problems, they're having psychotic like episodes by the time they're 10 years of age. There's evidence showing that the father that may be using can alter the autism gene, so you may have an autistic child, not as a
Oh,
result of the father's use. So, and nobody's screening parents. If you have a child with autism, they're not screening the parents' history of substance use. Did they use cannabis during pregnancy, mom or dad? Did they use other substances? But it seems to be very unique to cannabis. And so I think it's really created a very broad and very deep public health and safety concern.
that's amazing. I never knew about this. So you mean every parents that they give birth to an autism kids, they have history taking substance, cannabis. That's
Yes,
really
there's data showing that, and not every mom or dad that uses is going to have an autistic child. But if a couple has an autistic child, I think they should screen the parents for their history of substance use, including cannabis. Cannabis very often is ignored. It's kind of like the girl at the dance. It's always there, but nobody asked her to dance. She just
mm,
there all the time, and nobody pays attention to cannabis. Like even in the U.S., when if there's a driving fatality, if they find alcohol, they typically will stop at alcohol, and they don't test for other substances, including cannabis. And that's kind of my concern. And one of the reasons I do what I do is because I think people really should look a little more closely and sharply at cannabis as a factor in a lot of the things that we're seeing in the United States, especially with, I don't know if you're aware of the increase in mass shootings and violence in
yeah,
our
yeah,
country.
of course, definitely, yeah.
And we have a growing list, and I'm working on trying to publish a paper on a growing list of pretty horrific crimes that are associated with THC or the substance in marijuana. And we're talking about beheadings, we're talking about mutilations, we're talking about mass shootings,
Mhm.
stabbings, all sorts of horrific crimes that we've never really experienced to the degree we're seeing now. And the question I have always asked, is it because we're expanding our program so much? in the US, and there's really no guardrails or caps on this. I think Canada's probably done a better job at monitoring the health impacts, but the United States is kind of a free for all, especially with these
Free
high
for
potent
all.
products. Like for example, like the pediatric poisonings. I mean, the kids that are getting into the gummies and they're ending up in the hospital or in the intensive care unit. In the country of Canada, the province of Quebec banned edibles, and they have a much lower pediatric poisoning rate than the other provinces in Canada. So these edibles and these candies that are attractive to kids, they're very colorful, they're cartoony,
Mhm.
they taste sweet. I mean, these kids they get into everything. I mean, they get into cigarettes and alcohol and all and household cleaners. They put everything in their mouth. And then in the U.S., with all these edibles that are available with cookies and soda pop and candy and lollipops. These kids are getting sick and they end up in the emergency department. And some of them end up on a ventilator, because they don't metabolize THC like an adult would. So these are much more dangerous to children. And we're seeing this, and I think I posted something on either LinkedIn or X about the number of poisonings have gone up over 1,000% over the past 8 years. That's a significant rise. It's not like it doubled, the going up 100%. It went up
Yeah.
1,000, almost 1,500% in the kids that are younger than 5 years of age. And a lot of people keep blaming the parents. Well, yeah, you got to keep those things out of your kids' hands, but what's making them sick is the chemical that's in the edible. It's the THC in the edible that is making these kids sick. So even if the parents do everything in their power, some of these kids are getting them at school. They bring the products to school and they
Mhm.
hand them out, and they're
Definitely,
very
yeah.
and the kids are very unsuspecting of getting poison, and they start having panic attacks. They pass out. Some of them can have a seizure, and they end up in the hospital. And so they may be done just kind of serendipitously, just because one of their friends brought some candy to school and they didn't realize that it was a marijuana product.
Oh, so we just need to, create more awareness so that people will know better about the usefulness of marijuana and the side effects. And okay, Stat also said 3 in 10 user develop cannabis use disorder. What does disorder really looks like on a daily life, doctor? What does cannabis disorder really looks like?
Cannabis use disorder is basically an addiction to It's just like any other substance. You have opioid use disorder, alcohol use disorder, and you have cannabis use disorder. It's an
Okay.
addiction problem where they use frequently. They have to use more to get the desired effect. They have a hard time stopping. If they do stop using, they have a very common withdrawal syndrome that's very similar to alcohol withdrawal. They get drug craving, they get antsy, they get jittery, their heart rate goes up. It's a very well documented withdrawal syndrome from cannabis. And over time, I mean, historically, when the products were less potent, the addiction rate or the use disorder rate was about 9% in an adult and about 18% in an adolescent, just because the adolescent's brain is more vulnerable to addiction. But
Mm.
now with these potent products, the addiction rate's now in the 30%. Nearly one third of people that are using regularly will have a use disorder where they can't stop using. And they're very heavy smokers. And now the data is showing that those people that have use disorder have trouble with opioids. They have trouble maintaining a job. They have trouble with all sorts of things in their life, just like any other substance that can disrupt your life because of use.
Doctor, what is opioids? I heard you say opioids.
Opioids are things like heroin, oxycodone, um, hydrocodone, the things that come from the poppy plant.
Mhm. That's
Morphine.
okay.
Those are the opioids. Those are typically used for pain. And we've had, I published a paper that fentanyl, which is kind of a scourge in the U.S. I don't know how bad it is in Nigeria, but fentanyl is the new heroin. I mean, the heroin use is going down, and fentanyl is killing hundreds of thousands of people in the U.S. over time. And it's interesting. We published a paper that fentanyl death rates were higher in states that have marijuana programs compared to states that did not have marijuana programs. And it was a significant difference because these
Why?
drugs all play well. They play well in the sandbox. You know, they're kind of stable mates. They play very well. And interestingly, the endocannabinoid and the opioid systems are very, very closely related. And I think there is evidence that cannabinoids do have pain relieving qualities, but they're very intricately tied to the opioids. And there's a lot of data showing that chronic users have a higher risk of developing opioid use disorder. Cannabis is actually more addictive in an adolescent than opioids are in an adolescent, especially if you're an early onset user, talking between like 12 and 18 years of age. It's much, and I was surprised as a pain physician to hear that data. That came from the American Academy of Pediatrics, that cannabis
Oh,
is more addictive than opioids are in an adolescent brain. And I think, and that's one of the take home messages is you need to delay onset of use until at least 25, even 30 years of age, just because the brain isn't fully developed until that time. And that's the primary target organ, is the brain.
so what I'm trying to understand now is this. This substance is killing people every day, and people are still taking it. What is the psychological part of this? Because I'm trying to understand. Just like I know this thing is going to harm my health if I take it, but I still take it. Just like on the packet of cigarettes, it's been written on it, smokers are liable to die young, but people don't really care about it. People just take it. What is the psychological effects part of it that we don't really know?
Well, that's a very good point. I think we need to have better warnings, like don't use during pregnancy. This is bad for your health. You can have risk of psychosis. You can have risk of suicide. But the industry is so large and powerful, they keep fighting to not have warning labels because they want people to use. I mean, this is just big tobacco 2.0. I mean, I remember the days of advertising on TV and cigarette vending machines and they were marketing to kids with the candy cigarettes. I mean, this is the same playbook that big marijuana is using to target younger people so they can have lifelong customers because now there's a 30% addiction rate. And now the tobacco industry is losing market share. So now the tobacco industry is dumping billions of dollars into the marijuana business because they don't want to lose that market. And now the alcohol companies are dumping marijuana money into the marijuana industry because they want like marijuana infused drinks and that sort of stuff. So again, all of these substances like to play well together. And my concern, circling back to your point, is that there's a psychological risk to using because the brain is the target organ. So you're talking about an increased risk of depression, an increased risk of suicidality, an increased risk of psychosis. So it's important to protect the brain, which is our primary target organ, and also protect the heart because people don't overdose from cannabis. They don't stop breathing like they do with opioids. Um, the cannabis kills people in indirect manners, either through car accidents, through heart attacks, through strokes, through suicidality, through hyperemesis. So it kind of indirectly is killing people. But the problem that I find speaking to doctors at very well-known institutions like Mayo Clinic and UCLA is that
Okay.
doctors don't even know this. And that's why I continue to do what I do, because I think it's important that communities are educated so people in their communities and patients that doctors are seeing can make informed decisions about their health.
That's amazing. So, doctor, I'm thinking, a lot of people just take cannabis, different type of substance, they derive. One of the things I read a book about this addiction of a thing. It says something that what really makes people get addicted to something is that they keep on finding the how can I put this word? The enjoyment they derive from it at first, the first time they use it, the joy, the value they got from it, they keep on searching for it over and over and over again till it becomes an addiction. So, what are the early signs someone needs to look out for? when you are taking substance, when you are taking cannabis, for you to be assured that you are not being dependent on it? What are the early signs someone needs to look out for, doctor?
That's a really good question. I mean, and this kind of goes to any substance of addiction,
Okay.
like alcohol
Okay.
or opioids, is you look for change in behavior. You look for in maybe in somebody that's in school a change in their grades. Maybe they can become more isolated. Maybe they have a change in their friend groups, and the parents have to be kind of keep their eye on that. Maybe they have social media. You got to follow your kids on social media because I think social media is an addiction as well to a
Okay.
lot of folks. And so I think that those things that you have to look for: change in behavior, falling grades, change in friends, becoming withdrawn, hiding, stealing money to support their habit from their parents, all those things. And some of them can be very subtle. I mean, I know people that have uh, the next thing they know, their kid is having a problem, and then the bulb goes on. They go, looking back over the past 6 to 12 months, I noticed that Johnny may have been a little more isolated. He'd become a little more angry and short. And a lot of parents will put that to, well, they're just going through teenage years and they're getting rebellious or what have you. So a lot of those things can be very subtle. But it's important that you really keep your finger on the pulse of your kids and your friends. I mean, even in the young adult, 18 to 25 years of age, the same things can happen. They become withdrawn. They change their friends. They start isolating themselves. You can smell their marijuana, for example, on them more often. They don't
Mm.
interact normally anymore. Those are kind of the red flags.
That's very good. That's very detailed. That's very detailed. So you once mentioned um young people, teenagers taking marijuana at the early stage, what it could cause to them. So I really want to know more for young people, teenagers taking marijuana. What are the side effects of what is the side effect? What happens to their brain when they started taking marijuana at a very early stage of their life? What happens to their brain?
Well, again, like I mentioned several times, the brain is a target organ. So, um, there, when a young person starts using regularly, like daily or near daily, it can affect their IQ, their intelligence quotient over time. There's been data showing that regular users over time lose about 4 to 8 IQ points over time. They don't their grades, they can't think, they can't process, their memory isn't very good. They can't do simple math, for example. They struggle, and that's one of the reasons their grades may fall because they don't pay attention. And the thing about cannabis is that it's not like alcohol. I mean, if you drink, it's in and out of your system with a matter of hours. And the effects of cannabis can be persistent over time, and it can accumulate over time. So even if you use on a regular basis for maybe 6 months and you stop, the next day you're not going to be okay. The brain will still struggle for weeks to months after stopping, and that's kind of it. There's a longer lasting impact on the brain in cannabis users than there are with other substances like opioids or alcohol, for example.
That is amazing. That's amazing. And I want to switch into I've seen a lot of big superstars like musicians. Some of them post on their social media like they take cannabis in order for them to get to this high level of thinking, in order for them to write good lyrics. Most of them normally say that they take so much of it in order for them to think I. Is there any side effect? You feeling like okay, your body can still take it right now? What I'm thinking more about the social aspect. For someone who is like 35 years old, is more depending on cannabis in order for him to think about writing a good lyrics. Is there the side effects for that type of person in the next 10 to 20 years from now?
Well, I think that's interesting you bring that up. Um, I think that the marijuana industry is using some people that are famous for their platform to promote use. But there are other, people say, well, it makes me more creative. Therefore, I can write better lyrics, for example.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
now we are seeing some of those famous people coming out and saying that marijuana wasn't good for them. Elton John, for example, recently talked about marijuana use being bad for his creativity and bad for him. And I think there's two or three other famous musicians that have come out and said it really didn't do good by me, and I felt more creative off of it than I was on it. But the mainstream media doesn't like that, and the industry don't like those people that are saying anything negative about their plant. They don't get as much notoriety as you are with the singers that say, "Well, I'm more creative, I do a better job, and look, I'm a famous musician, etc." Or a famous sports athlete. They're kind of using their athleticism and their fame as a platform for legalization of cannabis. But there's other athletes and professional athletes and stars and famous people that are saying, no, it didn't do good for me. But the industry doesn't want to hear about their stories, and they've kind of
Hmm.
been shunned by the industry because maybe historically they were in favor of it, and then they had a problem, and now they're not in favor of it. So now they're on the bad side of the industry. So they don't like to promote those stories at all. They don't want to hear anything negative about cannabis.
Yeah, I think I understand it best now. So, do you think cannabis is going to shape the way the next generation are going to think, learn, and interact in the world?
Absolutely, 100%. And I think that's multifactorial. Number one, if you're having more women use during pregnancy, and the data is showing that the offspring are having problems from a mental perspective, but there's also some recent data showing there's an increased risk of obesity and diabetes and cardiovascular disease just in the in utero offspring. And then you have the pediatric and adolescent population that may not have been exposed in utero that are being exposed to marketing and advertising and social media platforms. Those kids, I mean, it's really in their face all the time, and so I think it's very concerning to me what our future generation is going to have to contend with. Because again, these products that are available in the U.S. are nothing like they were 10 years ago or 15 years ago. I mean, the potency is really skyrocketed, and there's no guardrails or caps on this, and those products are very, very dangerous. So I think it's very concerning to me as a parent and as a scientist and as a physician to see what's going to come down the pipe. Again, I mentioned earlier, we are in uncharted waters. We don't know what the long-term effects are going to be from a from a public health perspective with these new products that are flooding the market. I mean, these molecules are being manipulated. There's so many different products. There's not only Delta 9 THC, you have Delta 8, Delta 10, HHC, THCP, THCO, that are all being created and flooding the market. So we don't know which is the bad one, which is the good one, what combination is bad. It's just frightening to know that something is not good is going to happen at the end of the day. The sky is not going to fall, but I think
Hmm.
we're really setting ourselves up for a new generation of either dumb people or sick people or both, especially when it's circulating around cannabis. And the things that we're seeing and predicting in that world are worse, in my opinion, than the things with alcohol, tobacco, and opioids. I mean, those things are, in my opinion, very simple. You smoke too many cigarettes, you get addiction, and you get lung cancer. If you take an
Hmm.
opioid, you take too much, you die because you stop breathing, and there's addiction with that. With alcohol, there's addiction, there's liver disease and death in that respect. But cannabis, you're not seeing the cardiovascular effects, you're not seeing the suicidality effects, the depression effects, the in utero exposure effects, all these other impacts, the hyperemesis. I mean, it's much more broad and deep in my mind than these other substances. All of them are not good for us. And I don't know why cannabis is getting a free pass. They're promoting it as healthy and medicinal and herbal. And yeah, I think there are medicinal qualities to cannabis. But and I support 100% appropriate drug development protocols to give me a
Let,
cannabinoid that is good for whatever condition. I mean, we have dronabinol that's been around since the 80s for chemotherapy associated nausea and vomiting. I mean, things like aspirin come from the bark of the willow tree. I think we have chemotherapeutic agents that come from plants. We have heart agents that come from plants, like digitalis comes from the foxglove plant, which is, poisonous in and of itself. So I believe, and there are medicinal qualities to plants and botanicals, but it shouldn't get a free pass. It should be studied. It should be uncontaminated, because a lot of the products that are being sold are contaminated with things like arsenic, cadmium,
Mhm.
pesticides, fungicides, all these things that are being contaminated, and people are consuming them. I mean, this is really a public health and safety risk because these products don't pass the test and don't meet the muster of purity. And that's one of my platforms, is the product integrity in a lot of these things is poor. And so, you have a person that might have a product that has an antifungal agent on it, called mycobutanol, and some of the products have been found to have mycobutanol on it. And when you heat mycobutanol, it turns into cyanide. So, I mean, those are the things that worry me about these products, because I believe there are medicinal properties to it. For example, in my book, one of the chapters in neurology was written by some researchers in the state of Alabama, on Epidiolex, which is a
And
purified, primarily CBD or cannabidiol, that is used for a very narrow spectrum of pediatric seizure, and it works. And I'm fine with that. I'm not fine with people going home and making CBD in their kitchen with different chemicals, and God knows what's in it, and giving
mhm.
it to their child. And I think that, like, for example, some of my colleagues that are pediatric seizure specialists are at the
Okay.
bedside with these kids that seizures are worse because their parents are making this product in their garage or their basement or their kitchen that is not tested. We don't know what's in it. It's not purified, and the kids get sick. That is one of my other concerns, several concerns.
That's amazing. So why is cannabis being celebrated in some places and being demonized in some places, but yet they use it everywhere? Why is that?
I think part of it is just a lack of education and misinformation. I
Mhm.
agree with you. Even in the United States, there, like, the mainstream media glorifies the plant. They talk about, we're making so much money. They never talk about the losses. I mean, all these other industries like alcohol and opioids and tobacco, they make billions of dollars for their industry, but we know what the healthcare and societal costs are. But in marijuana world, they don't talk about that. They just talk about, oh, we make so much money and this is great and it's going to go to schools. And that never seems to be the case. The schools that are expecting the money never see the money. Like in Colorado, for example, the schools were waiting still for the money from the industry, kind of disappears into the general budget. So I don't know. I think it's a matter of misinformation, misunderstanding, and promotion of a substance that shouldn't be promoted. And again,
Um,
I don't judge people whether they use or not. As a physician, if you're gonna use, these are the things you got to look out for. If you got to look out for your kids, you got to look out for yourself. Don't get behind the wheel and drive because it's impairing, those sorts of things.
that's good. So how do we cut through the stigma and misinformation so people can make clear, informed decision? How can we cut through all those misinformation?
Oh, it's extremely difficult because I think the industry really has a hold on the media. Even on social media, they tend to promote it more so. And even on the local news stations, you never hear anything negative about cannabis. Even in the mass shootings and the violent crimes that we're seeing in the US, they never mention the M word, because they don't want to say it, because it's a bad, they want to continue to promote it. They never say marijuana. They never say cannabis. They'll say alcohol. If there's an alcohol
Mhm,
driving,
mhm.
they'll say, well, it was an alcohol related fatality. But if it's not alcohol and it's probably marijuana, they will never, for some reason, I don't know why, they just don't say the word. And that's part of my frustration is in the educational side is people have to know the real the real I don't know what I'm the word I'm trying to come up with. The total impact I think is currently underestimated. I think it's a lot worse than it's showing right now. And if, to be honest with you, I hope I'm wrong. People like to be right, and
Mm-hmm.
doing this for nearly 20 years, I haven't been wrong, and I have been right, and I don't want to be right. Because if I'm wrong, fine, I'll crawl under a rock and disappear. Nobody will care anything about me. But so far, I haven't been wrong. And if I am right moving forward, we are really going to be creating a new generation, as I mentioned, of very sick people, and with addiction problems and mental health problems and intelligence problems. The brain is a precious organ, and why can't people live and be raised in a drug-free environment when it's all around them? It's kind of shoved down their throat. It's in their peers. It's in their parents. It's on social media. It's hard to get away from that, and that's very concerning. I think they need to put some guardrails up and rein it in a little bit.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And the painful part is that you are very right about what you said. No matter what really happened, they always put the blame on every other thing except from cannabis, except from that. They never put that out there. And that is why we see a lot of people using it, big names, influencers using it, and those influencers have a lot of followers, and those followers are going to follow them to do what they are doing because they are going to be feeling that, oh, this is a very good thing since my own mentor is doing it. So
Right.
if cannabis were treated as part of an ecological system connected to health, environment, and society, how would we approach it differently?
Oh wow, you really hit a hot button for me because this is a an industry that prides itself on being natural and herbal and green, but the marijuana industry has a huge carbon footprint,
Okay.
and the environmental impact particularly in the United States, is nobody talks about it. For example, in the state of Colorado, the marijuana industry creates more carbon emissions than its coal industry. And the amount of electricity that the marijuana industry is using is continuing to go up significantly. I mean, they grow the plant, 24/7 under lights, and so the electricity is going and going and going. So it's not an environmentally safe industry. In California, for example, they're poisoning the water system with pesticides and fungicides, and that stuff is ending up in the drinking water of some of the indigenous people in Northern California that rely on game and crops for their sustenance. So they're
Mhm.
finding these poisons in the crops. They're finding the poisons in the animals that they're shooting to eat, and nobody talks about that. It's real. It's I don't know why, because this is with the whole climate change and sustainability and that's everybody's talking about around the world.
Mhm.
They don't talk about the damage that is occurring by the marijuana industry. It's damaging our environment. It's creating more carbon emissions. It's creating increased electricity use. It's creating problems in the land and the crops and the animals that are dying because they're getting poisoned. But people are completely ignoring that. I can send you a very interesting. I'm going to send you a video I'd like for you to watch by a
Okay.
gentleman I presented with by the name of Murad Gabriel, who was an environmentalist in California, and the
Okay.
stuff that he was finding in the dead animals, and the law enforcement people that I work with that are finding areas of the national forest that there's nothing living. There's no worms, there's no bugs, there's no snakes, There's no varmints, there's no mice or rodents. It's completely wiped out and dead. And it's just at the marijuana grows because of all the poison that they're using. And nobody talks about that.
That's really bad. So,
It's
do you think cannabis could ever become unified across boundaries, or will it always divide people's opinion?
I certainly, I'm hopeful that there could be some common ground on, for number one, cannabis is medicine or cannabinoids. I mean, we already have some, and even the recreational cannabis. I mean, I don't care what people do behind the closed doors of their own home. I really don't care. But as long as it's not impacting me as a person,
Mhm.
I don't really don't care what you do. I think there needs to be some unification and some common ground. There seems to be so polarized and so divisive and so separate that people can't agree to disagree. I'm always fine to debate people. I'm always open for other opinions, and I'm fine with that. But it's such a powerful industry that anybody like me that says, hold on, there's some problems going on here, I try to get squelched by the industry or the advocates saying I'm a liar, I'm just a prohibitionist, when in actuality, I'm not. I'm a realist, I'm a physician, and I'm a scientist, and I look out for the public health and safety of my community and my colleagues. And again, like we mentioned, well, let me say this one thing. How many substances are both medical and recreational? There really aren't any. Why is marijuana so special where they call it medicine, but we can just use it recreationally? There really are no medicines that are recreational. I think personally, get it off the doctor's plate. If you want to use it, recreational, fine, I don't care, but it shouldn't be called medicine because right now it's not. Yes, I think there are medicinal components to it, and we should
Mhm.
study it and create those medicines with normal drug development protocols that are safe and purified and not contaminated and proven to be effective. I am 100% behind that. We already have dronabinol, we have Epidiolex. Sativex isn't available in the US, but it's used in other countries, which is a purified 1-to-1 THC CBD ratio that are used in Europe and Canada for multiple sclerosis. I'm fine
Okay.
with those things. They've been studied and proved. Well, they haven't been proven. That's why Sativex isn't available in the U.S. because it hasn't met the muster of proof. But those products are cannabis-based medications, which I support 100%. I don't support people going making quote medicine in their garage or in the back of their car or in their basement or kitchen. That's not medicine. And you shouldn't combust. There's no medication that is delivered by combustion with a blowtorch. That is, in my mind, not medicine. If
That's
people want to
that's
use it recreationally, I don't care. But we have to be careful because the potencies are so strong. And I think the black market is still alive and well, even though they said it was going to go away. The illicit market is there. It's growing actually under the banner of legalization, and that's kind of it's like a cockroach. You can't kill it. It's going to be there all the time,
Mhm.
and that's I think in Canada they think they've done a better job. I think the illicit market is shrinking, but in the U.S., because it is kind of a free for all, it's alive and well. And we have cartels from all over the planet. We've got Chinese cartels, Russian cartels, Sinaloa cartels. We've got Lithuanian, Russian. They're everywhere because it's so
Everywhere.
easy to be in the black market in the U.S. because it's just easy. And those are my concerns for sure.
Okay. We've talked mainly about the side effect of cannabis. Where do you see the most promising medical uses of cannabis that science supports?
Well, it's certainly not in the area of pain. I think it's too much up for debate. I think there's most of the papers don't show the benefit for the use of cannabis in chronic non-cancer pain. Even in cancer pain, it hasn't been shown to be effective. Hasn't been shown to be effective more than placebo. And the problem with studying a plant in the world of pain, for example, is that the potencies are variable. The potency in the plant itself, it can vary from plant to plant to plant. So one plant could be 8%, the other one could be 15%. It's hard to
Okay.
do that appropriate study. I think the data is more strong with the cannabis-based medications we have now, like dronabinol for chemotherapy-associated nausea and vomiting. We have it better for Epidiolex in pediatric seizure, those sorts of
Okay.
things. But I think there's been over 8,000 studies in the U.S. at the cost of about $4 billion, and that hasn't shown much promise. And I think, and I'm all for ongoing research and study, but the problem is it hasn't been shown effective for the vast majority of medical conditions. And the FDA in the U.S. has not approved cannabis for one single condition, and they're kind of the leaders of what is medicine, what is not medicine, and they haven't approved it at all for anything other than the Epidiolex and the dronabinol that is already available for these things.
Okay. What gives you hope about the future of cannabis research? What gives you hope?
Um, Well, I am hopeful, like I said, that we can reach a common ground and do the appropriate research and create the products that are beneficial for certain medical conditions. And then on the recreational side, I think people need to be careful about potency,
Hmm?
and the side effects from mental health and the heart. Those are the things that I'm hoping that we finally get consensus and agreement with my colleagues as physicians, because most of them have no idea. For example, I always ask my friends and colleagues a question of how many drug interactions do you think CBD has or cannabidiol? Do you know?
No,
You've heard of CBD, correct?
no, I don't know what CBD is. What's CBD?
CBD is cannabidiol. So the two main um, molecules that come from the plant are delta 9 THC and
Okay.
CBD. CBD is cannabidiol. And they have that and Epidiolex is purified cannabidiol for pediatric seizure, etc. But CBD has over 627 drug interactions. That's a lot of drug interactions, especially
Great.
for like common over-the-counter things like Tylenol or ibuprofen. It has an interaction with that causing liver problems. And those are the things that people from UCLA didn't know. If they don't know, how does any person in any community going to know? So I have these little ladies come to me saying, I want to take CBD for my arthritis, but they're taking ibuprofen. And I tell them there's a moderate drug interaction with your ibuprofen and your CBD. You can end up with liver damage. Oh, I didn't know that. And so that's why I do what I do. And that's why I'm hopeful that the medical community at large has a better handle on it so they can educate bigger than I can just as a one person or through our nonprofit. We're only scratching the surface. And I really thank you for allowing me this time. I do have to get going. I have some patients coming in, but I do thank you for allowing me this time. And I'm more than happy to talk again down the road. And send me a note reminding me to send you that video on the environmental
Definitely.
impact.
And
It'll be,
one last
it'll be
thing. Oh, one last thing. So the last guest on the show left you a question. She said, if you could advise your 10 years old, your 10 years younger self, if you could advise that person, what would that be?
Don't go to medical school. No, if it was a if I was advising like my 10-year-old self,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, I, I'm a big advocate of people staying active and enjoying life. I mean, when I was a 10-year-old kid, I was playing in the woods. I wasn't, thank God I grew up before the internet, because we would just go out and have fun in nature, and we didn't worry about being abducted. We didn't worry about drugs. We didn't worry about all stepping on a contaminated needle like these kids these days have to do. So I think I would tell my 10-year-old self, good for you. You will be doing something good down the road.
That's amazing. What question are you leaving behind for the next guest on the show?
You enjoyed the show, isn't it? So what do you think about it? What's the feedback? And do you think you can add more positivity to the brand by subscribing, by sharing? What do you think if every one of us can come together and solve a bigger problem? Because that's what the platform is for. And you are not just my audience, you are my partner, and we are going to do something big together. Thank you for watching. To the next time.
Moonword talk, Moonword talk, Moonword talk, Moonword talk, Moonword talk. Yeah, we be the truth, be that light in the dark. Let the vibe come through, growth mindset, mind check. Yeah, we break the mold, had to hustle, build the struggle, turn that pain into gold. Episode done, but the grind don't stop. Straps in, tapping, let's rise to the top.